But it's still about what the Bible's about. And they left out food for Santa Claus. But boy, then you got to go into Mr. Whew, I've read this stuff till my eyes are crossing. And then you got to go into how they twisted St. Nicholas, the battle for Christmas. Mr. Nissenbaum brings out how that they restructured Santa Claus and Christmas. He was a big, Clement Moore was a big landowner and a businessman in Manhattan, very rich, very wealthy. He was trying to restructure a system when he wrote The Night Before Christmas. He wanted to get, instead of having these people that went from door to door, and he'll go into the first Christmas that they sell, that one family had in America, the first Christmas in America, back in the 1700s, and how the people would come from door to door and they'd come over their house and how they'd demand food. That's where the dead are coming back, and you're going to feed the dead or feed upon the dead. And they turned this around finally where they would feed upon the dead, and that's called the Mass, or eat the dead. And the dead was their ancestors, and the dead was their ancestors who were gods. They made their ancestors gods. So since they made their ancestors gods, they called their sacrifices down to be their gods, and then they ate of their gods. And that's, except you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. They've twisted into that. Notice all the perversion, just the twisting of truth. Well, they picked this. Well, I was going to tell you something. When you go into this, he tells you how that, he says it's not even stretching it to say that he wrote The Night Before Christmas to make St. Nicholas acceptable. St. Nicholas, he's got pictures of him in the mid-1800s. In 1822, he wrote the Night Before Christmas. And he was wanting to get Christmas back then in America was people going from house to house demanding food, otherwise we'll do something to destroy your house. We'll do something to it. And that's the same thing as trick or treat, but they did it at Christmas. And when he writes he's trying to paint St. Nicholas as a good guy. So he puts into The Night Before Christmas, there's nothing to dread. How's the line go? Y'all know how the line goes The Night Before Christmas. All through the house, not a creature stirring, even the mouse. Put his finger beside his nose. Huh? That there was nothing to dread. There's a line in there, there's nothing to dread. The reason the line is in there, nothing to dread, was because he's trying to turn this Christmas thing around to make it a commercial thing for his business system in Manhattan. And that's why he wrote it. It's all about money. But you got to really read the Battle for Christmas. And then he shows how that they turned St. Nicholas by changing his dress and by employing these different cartoonists like Thomas Nast to draw pictures of him. And originally St. Nicholas had this long pipe. Well, he said the aristocrats smoked the long pipes. Poor people smoked short pipes because they could work with them and they just break the ends off, smoke the short pipes. Well, St. Nicholas originally had a long pipe, and they finally had him smoking the short pipe. They were trying to identify him with the peasantry, but they're trying to paint him up acceptable so there's nothing to dread. And that's the whole idea of bringing... This thing has been... People talk about schemes and men behind the scene that are trying to trick the American public, and this is what a lot of this is about. Of course, he is a Jew, Nissenbaum. He's not afraid to say it, see. But he is a professor. And the information is just tremendous. And it'll tell you, that's a picture of St. Nicholas in the mid-1800s on the front of it. It's not a jolly old elf. I believe there's a scheme behind the Coca-Cola presentation to make this jolly. He was an elf with 8 tiny reindeer. They were little bitty when they started off. Of course, that's all ridiculous, to get to all the world with a great big group of reindeer. With a reindeer that are 15 feet tall, that's ridiculous. But that's St. Nicholas in the mid-1800s, and that's not something that's acceptable. But he's got a little short pipe there. He doesn't have the big, long aristocrat's pipe. So they wanted him to identify with the poor people but to show there's nothing to dread so they can start generating capital income. Do y'all know how long we've been under a conspiracy for a long time? And it's all it is men want to make money. That's all it is. Well, let me go ahead with this. How much time do I have? I got to go into the back of this. They talk about the dancing, dancing in the sky until the rising of Pleiades. Well, let me show you how I'm going to tie some of this to. I'm going to tie this to what Israel was doing. Let me go back here to the back of this. I don't even have time to get into all this. He's going into Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and when you get into that mystic attitude in England of the old world, and you get into they're killing witches, the same time that one of the popes had commissioned the killing of witches, I can't remember his name, same time, that's the time of the Inquisition started. And they were accusing the witches of heresy. The witches were Protestants. That's the Inquisition. Huh? Yeah. That's what the witches were Protestants. And then they got the scare going where they got to killing a bunch of them. But let me show you something here. Then I'm going to give you some scripture here. People say, you don't preach without scripture. I'll tell you, I don't know how to give you all this information. So come up and look at the books. All right. And I want you to turn over to Exodus 34. I've wrestled with this a long time. I've told you don't ever know where you're going to find answers. And I got to read in this Celtic book, Exodus 34. Now, Exodus 34. Now, when you're reading in 2 Babylons and in some other books, I just happen to know where it is in the 2 Babylons. When you're reading in the 2 Babylons, I'm just trying to give you some information about Halloween and where it comes from. Where's my... Oh, here it is. When you're reading the 2 Babylons, they'll tell you, you look up Druid in the back of your 2 Babylons book. Look up Druid, and it'll take you to a bunch of pages. It won't say Halloween. Whenever you're looking, if you look in, if you happen to be able to get the Golden Bough, you can get the 1 volume. You can look up Halloween in here, and he'll have stuff on Halloween and Samhain. Samhain is pronounced Samhain. He'll have both of them in here. But he only has Druid in here. But he'll tell you that, but you connect the Druids here with Halloween over there. It's the same thing. There's no difference. And he'll bring out in the 2 Babylons that the Druids would meet, or the Halloween people would meet on a strip of beach or somewhere in the woods, and they would start a fire, have a big fire, blazing bonfire. Oh, you want to know where the bats come from? They brought this out the other night on the Halloween special. There's so much information. The bats identified with it is because they would light these big bonfires or balefires, and mosquitoes are attracted to the balefires, and the bats would come in to take the mosquitoes out, looking for the mosquitoes. So they identified the bats with Halloween. Boy, they got a wild imagination, don't they? Well, the Druids would take a hat or a basket of some kind. They would take a bunch of pieces of oat cake, and they would blacken one of the oat cakes, and everybody would reach in the oat cake, reach in the basket, pull out a piece of oat cake, and the one that got the black one was blackballed. If you're going to blackball somebody from a lodge, if you put in a blackball, that means he's voted out. Well, the one that got the black piece of oat cake, they had to jump through the fire. And that has a particular meaning. And Israel was passing their children through the fire constantly, weren't they? That's how Druid is connected with Israel. Israel was constantly passing their children through the fire. Well, let me read this paragraph here. An ingenious theory was invented after the introduction of Christianity with the purpose of allowing such ancient rites to continue with a changed meaning. They want to change the meaning so they'll be acceptable. Like I said, you can't change a pig into a kitty cat by bathing it and dressing it up and putting a new outfit on it. It ain't going to help. The passing of persons and cattle through flame or smoke was explained as a practice which